That is a cool looking shot of the Statue of Liberty. Joe Biden would look at that and go, I have no idea what that is. That's what he would say. And they would go get some chocolate chip or Rocky Road ice cream and be off on his bicycle and then fall. But then again, we've seen that for a while now, and we don't want to see any more of that. All right, I'm ad-libbing. I'm off prompter. I apologize. Welcome back, everybody, to American Sunrise. I'm David Brody. President Trump facing fierce criticism for what his opponents are calling a totalitarian approach after he threatened to revoke the broadcast license of ABC and NBC. Trump labeling the networks as biased, suggesting they are an arm of the Democrat Party. In a post on Truth Social, Trump accused the networks of delivering, quote, 97% bad stories, demanding they either pay big fees or lose their ability to air news. For reaction to these latest claims, let's welcome to American Sunrise the White House Deputy Press Secretary, Anna Kelly. Anna, great to have you here this morning. So what do you think? I mean, you think there's going to be any movement on this? I mean, Brendan Carr chairs the FCC. Wondering what you can tell us this morning. Good morning.
Well, look, I think the president said it best. The fact that these outlets are just totally running cover for Democrats, and they are going despite the truth. Remember, in Caroline Leavitt's very first briefing, she made the very important point. Of course, we hold ourselves here at the White House to a standard of truth, and so does this president. That's why he let the press in for about 3.5 hours of comments, of questioning yesterday. That's why he had just 2 days ago 3 press conferences. This president is leading with transparency and access that the press have never had before, certainly under Otto Penn Joe Biden, and yet even still you have 97% of negative coverage, as you said, despite the fact that this president is quickly carrying out his campaign promises that Americans resoundingly voted for. And so look, yes, the president, as he said it best, is looking at this because we hold ourselves to a high standard of transparency, of access, of truth here at the White House, led by this president, and news outlets who have a special responsibility to the public should do the same.
Does that standard of transparency makes doing your job a little bit more difficult because you know there's going to be so much scrutiny from the mainstream media?
I think it makes it easier. Look, again, one thing that we always say here in the press shop is the president is the communications director, and that's what we want. We don't want some nameless staffers, whoever was signing Joe Biden's auto pen, running our country. This president was resoundingly elected by the overwhelming majority of Americans to do exactly what he's doing. So the fact that he is speaking directly to the American people actually helps us cut through the noise, because we're able to make sure that this president's message is getting out to the American people directly. So he's going to continue to do that despite these mainstream media's lies and negative narratives, because we know, the American people know, that he was elected to cool inflation, to carry out the largest border operation in history, to combat violent crime. That's exactly what he's doing, and we're going to continue to get that message out, because that, at the end of the day, is what the American people voted for.
Give us insight, if you can. Being there in the White House every day, I think people picture it a lot differently than it actually is. It's actually much smaller, much more compact than I think people realize. But there've got to be insights that you have, having watched this last administration. I called him the resident of the United States, never the president. But watching them and then seeing all the things they said, right, about the not telling us about the auto pen, but the things they said were going on. Just being there, what insight can you give us that those who might never see the inside of the White House might not understand, but that you can see in plain view now that you've been there, whether it's the cocaine story or the auto pen story or any of that? What do you see up close and personal that has changed the way maybe you thought of the news that is digested by the consumer?
Yeah, well, I think one of the biggest things that have come out of some of those testimonies is the fact that you had one of the top officials in the Biden administration, often speaking on behalf of the Biden administration, speaking to the Joe Biden's saying that he was competent, that he was competently running the country. The guy over 4 years spoke to Biden twice. I mean, and to get a little inside baseball here, I sit in the lower press office. That's just steps away from the Oval Office. So I think it's incredibly concerning the fact that you had people speaking on behalf so frequently to the administration, and they were lying to the American people. And we know that because how would they have any idea what Joe Biden's mental state was? They only talked to the former president twice over the course of his entire term. So we are just steps away from the Oval Office. And one thing that's great about President Trump is he is always welcome to feedback. He loves talking to his staff. He's very generous with praise. And so he's often with Caroline frequently before briefings, talking about, where his head is at on these issues. So I think that's incredibly concerning. And another point, the fact that we are actually just right off of the press offices. So the press are not only getting a ton of access to the president himself, they're constantly in our offices asking us questions. So despite the fact that they are enjoying truly unprecedented access to us, to this president, to his spokespeople, they continue to lie. They continue to push these misleading narratives, despite the fact that you had spokespeople in the previous administration who had truly no idea where Joe Biden's mind was at because they didn't talk to him.
Well, that's for sure. And by the way, one more media question. Is President Trump 29 or 79? Because he makes the Energizer Bunny look weak. I mean, that 3 hours and 14 minutes, are you kidding me? And here's the thing. This morning, media articles in the Washington Post and other places are like, what did we just experience? What was that? Wait a minute. Hold on for a second. It's like you would think that they would want the transparency, that he would be applauded for this. Instead, they find ways to rip him, thinking that every cabinet member is praising him and that's what this is all about. I mean, these people are a piece of work, as we like to say.
Totally, and I totally agree with you. This was an unprecedented level of access, and it's not just for the media. It's for the American people. The fact that this president opened the doors to a cabinet meeting where all of his cabinet officials, over 20 of them, gave really great updates about what they're working on. I mean, that is a level of transparency, again, of access that the American people are not used to after 4 years of sleepy Joe Biden. So, again, no matter what the media decides to push out of it, we're going to continue to provide that access to make sure the American people know exactly what we're working on, because, again, this president has worked at an unprecedented pace, signing more executive orders, I believe, than any other president in history, because this was a resounding mandate that he got from the American people to carry out all of these policies. He's going to continue to do that, and we're going to continue to bring that message right to households across the country.
During that cabinet meeting, I think it became very clear for anyone watching that President Trump is in command of all of the issues that are coming across his desk. He was able to eloquently answer specific questions about those issues. Is that part and parcel of his relationship with cabinet members, how much time he spends with them? We often see cabinet members showing up there at the White House, very likely meeting with the president. Even today, we're seeing that President Trump and the vice president are going to be having lunch together there at the White House. Is President Trump's command of all of these issues because he is often meeting with cabinet secretaries and he's engaging with them on the issues that affect this country?
I think that's a huge part of it. I think one thing, again, going back to the media, that they're not used to is they're used to this bottom-up approach where everything was dictated by staff, most of them that you haven't heard of, that weren't elected by anybody. The Trump administration is actually run by President Trump, the president of the United States, and part of that certainly includes kind of informal relationships and contacts with some of these cabinet secretaries, right? Not everything needs to be a formal meeting. He often just picks up the phone and calls cabinet secretaries if he has questions or wants updates on things they're working on. So I think that's really important. The fact that this president is no stranger to just getting on the phone, picking up the phone and contacting people across the administration to get answers, to talk about what they're working on, because, again, that's how he's able to directly communicate that to the American people. And that's why you see, as you saw in that cabinet meeting yesterday, he's so apprised of all of the goings on of his entire administration, because he is always up to date with what his cabinet secretaries are working on. And he has truly great relationships. I can testify personally. I see them in the West Wing quite frequently here, meeting with the president and discussing the latest issues.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I don't think that most people realize how many rules President Trump has broken, rules, deep state rules, right? Rules of the bureaucracy. I remember the very first time I was a teenager and I got to meet Dan Quayle. This is really going to date me.
Wow.
But, yeah, I know, right? But I remember him saying, it's such a cool thing that you're here today because you are here one of 2 days a year that the president and the vice president are both here. That's just one of the rules. I think about that all the time. I've seen J.D. Vance in the same room with President Trump. I can't even count how many times since this presidency. Most people don't realize, David Brody knows because you're such a veteran journalist and you've been there forever, but most people don't realize how many accepted rules there are about the way you preside as president, that President Trump has just blown up and said, no, we're going to do it this way because the American people deserve a level of transparency they've never had, and that's why government has declined the way it has. What other rules has he broken that are going to have a legacy in the level of transparency and authenticity that the American people are going to have now because of President Trump?
I think there's a lot that this president is doing. A big part of that is cutting through the bureaucracy and the bloat of previous administrations. I think Secretary Rubio's role, both as National Security Advisor and Secretary of State, is a great example because he's able to have these joint roles, and because we have leaner, more nimble agencies, those agencies are more able to cut through bureaucracy, cut through red tape, and more effectively serve the American people. In Secretary Rubio's case, that means that he is in the West Wing frequently. He is speaking to the president quite often. I see him almost every day. And he is able to then go to the Department of State and say, these are the president's priorities. And that means his staff at the State Department is more able to effectively execute. So because of this president's actions to make our bureaucracy more nimble, more responsive to the American people, it's ultimately more effective. And again, that means that we are able to more effectively carry out the president's agenda because that is what the American people voted for.
And Anna, one last question before you go. It has to do with GOP veterans in the House that are ripping Joe Biden's Afghanistan withdrawal because of course, the anniversary of the Abbey bombing that has just recently happened. So I'm curious to get your take on that because, I mean, this was really, I think, going to go down, honestly, as one of the top major issues that Biden had in his administration, and specifically from a political polling standpoint. We saw independents totally go away from him at that point because he had absolutely no clue what he was doing. I'm curious to get your take on what the president's doing in that regard.
Yeah, well, as you saw in the president's Oval Office meeting yesterday, I thought one of the most striking moments of that meeting was when one of the reporters asked the Abbey families, did you ever hear from Joe Biden? And they all shook their heads no. And I think that's an absolute tragedy. As the president often says, this was one of the most embarrassing days in our country's history. The fact that you had 13 brave service members left behind, that's unthinkable. And it would certainly never happened, would have never happened with this president as commander in chief, and it can never happen again. And so Secretary Hegseth, at the president's direction, is carrying out a very thorough investigation of exactly what happened, because those families and the entire country want to know, deserve to know exactly what resulted in the tragic loss of those 13 service members. And so this will never happen ever again under this president's leadership. And we will continue to communicate to make sure there's closure for those Abbey families, because they deserve to know what happened on that awful day.
Anna Kelly, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.
All right, still ahead on American Sunrise, Sacred Human, redefining natural wellness with everything from grass-fed beef, liver capsules to American-made supplements loved by thousands of customers across America. Learn how to unlock your body's highest vitality with their products right after the break.